Mother Teresa had this beautiful saying that says, "You may feel that what you are doing is but a drop in the ocean, but I tell you, it is less of an ocean without that drop." And that's the lesson I learned. And I was able to buy them food. And there was a lot of other times I would buy a kid lunch, and I'm not great for doing this. Most all the Westerners who went there, and non-Westerners, Japanese, Koreans, all did this because it was a decent thing to do. And candidly, it was cheap. I bought lunch for all those people. I doubt I spent $20, $30. I have no idea what I spent.
Yeah.
But, so that, yeah, things like, they would do things like that. And, but every day, I mean, I remember meeting this girl, and mostly, a lot of kids who begged on the street, they'd hit you up for a rupee or 10 rupees. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I met this girl. She was gorgeous. She was probably about 10 years old. Beautiful, beautiful kid. And she was awesome. Uncle, you give me 100 rupees. Oh my God. I loved her. I gave her the 100 rupees. Now I also know that she was probably getting extorted. She was probably having to turn some of that over. I ended up meeting this person she told me was her sister, who I'm very certain was working as a prostitute and was probably had some sort of pimp role behind her. So I always took to buying food because that's what they needed: food, milk, things like that.
Right, exactly. If you bought an egg roll for somebody, they weren't going to have to give part of that over to their overseer.
That's right. That's right. They could eat the whole thing right now. And even if you could buy them if you bought them a little extra something and they weren't going to eat it right now, they could stash it and they could have that orange, that banana, that whatever later. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned when you first got there, they asked for your religion. And I know religion is a big deal in India because there's Hindus and there's Pakistanis. In fact, when the British Empire broke up India, when they were on their way out, India was actually India, Pakistan, and what we now know today as Bangladesh. It was all the same country. But the Brits, when they moved out, they knew that, look, the Muslims and the Hindus aren't going to get along. So they had East Pakistan, West Pakistan, and India. And the Hindus who lived in Pakistan had problems, and the Muslims who live in India have problems. That's a big deal over there. And you mentioned the egg rolls. I thought that Hindus didn't eat meat. Do they not eat meat, but they eat eggs?
They'll eat eggs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Eggs, yeah. Yes. Maybe milk too?
Yeah. Eggs, yes. Milk, yes. And generally no meat, although, I've met Jews that eat pork, and I've met meat-eating Hindus. So
right. Okay.
They're all there.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
But the religion's a big deal. I mean, the spiritual life for most Indians is, in my experience there, was paramount. That came first. That came before country. That came before state. That came before everything. And people. I remember when I was going, people were like, "Oh my gosh, it's all Hindus." Well, it's not. It was only like 70% Hindu, which meant there was the entire population of the United States living in India that's not a Hindu.
Well, and you're right, and there's even a percentage-wise, it's not big. A Christian population in India. The Christian population in India is a very small percentage, but a very small percentage of 1.1 billion people is a lot of people.
It's a lot of folks, yeah, and a lot of them are from southern India. In particular, most of Mother Teresa's nuns came from an area called Kerala, where it is thought that Thomas the Apostle was ended up there at some point.
Okay.
And you also have a huge Portuguese that had settled on the coast of India in a place called Goa.
Goa, correct.
Where they still speak Portuguese. And so you have that Catholic influence there. But you still, I think India's the top 5, maybe top 3 most populous Muslim country. I think there's over 100 million, maybe 150, maybe 150 million even Muslims living in India. Where I stayed in Calcutta and spent a lot of time with was a primarily Muslim area.
Now you mentioned Premdan, the hospital you worked there. Yeah. Is that the only place you worked the whole time, or did you work at other places?
Good question. So I was there in November. I stayed for 4 months. I stayed November, December, January, February. I left in early March. And about a week before Christmas, I was at Mother Teresa's house, and a nun came up to me. Her name was Sister Benoy. She was amazing. And she said to me, would I be interested in going to a leprosy center? And I said, sure. And she had rounded up 3 other guys to go, all of whom I know, who is from Korea, Pedro, who is from Spain, and Miguel, who is from Portugal, and me. And we all went. It was about a 4-hour train ride out of Calcutta. And we went to this leprosy center. Now, this place was like a compound, had walls, buildings, and there were leprosy patients. There was also an orphanage there. There was also a school there. And they raised food. It was a farm, and they grew rice, they grew veggies, and we were there to clear this paddy, as it were. They wanted to grow rice, and you need to cut down the trees and all the vegetation so you could get it ready to plant rice.
Okay.
And so that's what we were doing for a few days, and then we got to meet the leprosy patients, and that was pretty incredible, because here's this biblical disease. I believe that's how most of us get introduced to finding out about leprosy.
Sure.
It's in the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament. And, it's a disease that still exists today in some parts of the world. And what I found, James, was people were amazing. I mean, there were kids who had it. There's this girl named Poonam who had the most beautiful skin I've ever seen, but she had leprosy, and she had her legs amputated because of it. But she was lovely. And then I met this guy there, and he spoke English. And so this is December of 97, and he said to me, 1998 is going to be a great year. I said, oh, good, I said, he said, do you know why? I said, I actually thought about it. And I thought, well, I knew India had gotten independence from England in 47, so 97 was the 50th anniversary of that. And I said to him, I don't know why. He said, because in 1998, it will be 50 years that I've had leprosy. This guy's marking it off like we do, I said, really? I said, and that's been a great thing. He says, it has been a very great thing. I said, well, tell me about it. He said, well, and he didn't grow up at the bottom rung. He was not an untouchable, but he had family. But in 48, he got leprosy, and he had been going to school. And he said, if I didn't have leprosy, I would have probably just stayed in this part of India where I grew up in. And he said, but I got it. He said, and I had to leave. And he said, I have seen almost all of India, because what would happen is people in his situation that were that poor, that outcast, they would hop on the train. And no, they didn't have tickets or anything. They just hopped on and rode along till they got to where the train was going, or they got kicked off. He said, I've seen almost all of India. And he starts naming off these places he had been to. And he said, and I never would have had that without leprosy. He said, and now look at me. I am old, and look where I live, this great place. And he was incredibly grateful.
Wow.
And it was amazing. It was quite the insight into, so anytime I've ever thought, maybe I've got some lemons coming my way, this guy, I mean, you talk about making lemonade out of lemons. This guy was amazing. The other experience I had at the leprosy center was Sister Benoy comes in to this little place that I'm sleeping in with the other workers. And she comes in and says, okay, boys, today the doctor is coming. And she looks at me and she goes, and Kieran, you are going to help him with the surgery. Gotta be I am not the person for this, I'm not. And you really don't have any choice. You're being voluntold, you kind of like when your wife tells you you're doing something, you're like, I am? Well, yeah, you are.
Sure.
So the doctor comes in, shockingly an Indian doctor, and he was great. He'd been coming to this leprosy center for, I think, almost 20 years. And he said, you have to have the trust. He said, so what I did the first time I come in and I come into where these people are to see. He said, and I have my gloves on. He said, and I take my gloves off. And I show them I'm not afraid to touch them with my bare hands. Because he knew the science that if he would wash his hands with hot soap and water, he's not going to get leprosy.
Because leprosy, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a disease that's not spread by skin contact so much, but it is spread by respiratory, isn't it?
I'm not 100% sure on that.
That's what I've always understood. I mean, not so much by skin, but by respiratory, and it's not highly contagious. Sure, it's contagious, but it's not highly contagious.
It's not highly contagious, and if you do get it and you take the treatment for it, you'll be cured and you won't have a problem.
Right. And the cure is antibiotics, basically, right?
Yes, that's right. And part of the problem you get, though, is, it's like when you take antibiotics for a lot of things, you start taking it and you feel better. So they stop taking the medicine because they might need it later. Well, they don't complete the course of treatment, and they needed to.
Yeah.
So some people would get it back.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, the doc comes in and he says, okay, Kieran, you're helping me. I said, okay. And I remember walking in this building and I prayed. I said, God, I don't know how to do this. So I need strength. Like, my dad's a dentist. My dad would have been fascinated by it. And I said, I need to summon that. I need God, I have to do this. And I need this strength. And immediately, I think I was given grace of God. And I went in, and part of what happens in leprosy is your fingers can curl up because it attacks the nerves.
Mm-hmm.
And this doctor did this surgery where he'd slice them open on the forearm. He'd pull out a tendon, which looks like a white rubber band, split it in two, run it up, hook it back up, and they could regain the use of their clawed hand, which was phenomenal that he could do it.
Wow.
And then there were some people that had gangrene and they had to get their toe cut off or something. And I was able to do that. And then we go to this guy, he's laying down. And now at this point, I'm feeling pretty good. We've been doing it for about an hour and a bit. And I'm like, okay, all right, next, what do we have here? And he looks at me and goes, no, this man, Kieran, we are going to cut off his leg. And I was like, what? And the guy knows it. Now there's no anesthetic. There's no nothing.
What?
I mean, we're using no. We're using tourniquets, okay? And so the doctor, this man, we're going to cut off his leg right below his knee, okay? It's his left leg and right below his knee. So the doctor put a tourniquet on above it. And then I'm sitting there just like, and I am praying. I'm like, God, I don't know what to do, and I need some help here. And then the doctor takes the scalpel and cuts the skin and peels down, and then, cuts through the flesh and and I realized this guy is panicked. He's got a towel over his face, but he's panicked.
Is the patient awake at this time?
Oh yeah, wide awake.
They don't even give them ether or anything.
No.
Well, how do you stand the pain?
Well, it's dead flesh.
Okay.
I think it's dead flesh. You're just feeling pressure.
Okay.
If anything.
Okay.
But you're dealing with the reality of this is going on.
Right.
And it just came to me, I should just grab his hand. And I didn't know culturally how that would be. So I put my hand out and I took his hand, and he grabbed it and he squeezed hard. And there was that very human connection. I don't know him. He doesn't know me. I don't speak his language, and he doesn't speak mine. But we have this shared human experience of what's going on right now. And the doctor finished the procedure, cut his leg off, and that was it. That was it. Like, that's what happened, and I had the strength to be able to do it. And I really do. For me, that was a God moment. That was all spiritual strength that came to me.
Well, how did you aid the doctor? Did you hand him tools? Did you
hand him scalpels? Do whatever he said. Pick up the bucket that had the cut off toe in it. Drag it. Carry it to the next place. Things like that. Yeah.
Wow.
But it's amazing because you put yourself in these situations. It's no different than our men and women that go into combat and they end up doing things that they don't think they can do. But you can do them.